we'll touch briefly on the EIDL loans, which is a separate program within the CARES Act, which stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So with that, we'll get into it here. So the CARES Act was signed into legislation on March 27th. It was a little over $2 trillion relief package in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Within the CARES Act is this Paycheck Protection Program. So this program provides 100% federally guaranteed loans up to $10 million through a program run through the Small Business Administration. But the most important thing within this is that if these loan proceeds are to be used for qualifying expenses, then they would be 100% forgivable, to allow these businesses to really continue to pay their employees, pay rent, and helping to ensure that there isn't a mass increase in unemployment filings, really the true spirit of this program. So in addition to that, there's also relief for SBA borrowers. So current SBA loans to small businesses that have been made, the government will be making 6 months of principal and interest payments for their loans, their existing loans, to help to cover them during this period. And then the last two things that we'll talk about also are those EIDL loans. These were made directly through the SBA. The difference there is that the PPP loans were loans that have been directed towards our country's banks to help the government administer within this program. There was candidly there was a short time frame of when the PPP loans were passed within this CARES Act, and the amount of time that the banks had to understand the act is, some 900-page bill, understand how it needed to be administered, and then figure out a process in order to process the hundreds of thousands of loan requests that were to come in. So it's been a very chaotic last 2.5 months, is trying to figure out how we're going to do all this, at least speaking from our institution's perspective. So again, going into defining what the CARES Act truly is, and within this $2 trillion stimulus plan, $349 billion of that $2 trillion was designated for the Paycheck Protection Program, which is again what we're going to be focusing on today. I think people saw that the loan funds went pretty quickly the first time around. Within a matter of days, all of the $349 billion in funding was spoken for, and so it was another call to Congress to secure more funding for that, in which they did, and it ultimately passed a $310 billion package on top of the 349 that was initially passed. And to my knowledge, as of today, there hasn't been a ton of visibility in that, but where it stands today. But I want to say I think probably 2/3 of that is still or has been spoken for, so a third I think is still available. I think we're still processing loans today, so provided really some much needed support to our country's small businesses. Talk about some general SBA guidelines for this program. This deck is somewhat dated. It was from a couple of weeks ago, but still I think provides some really strong information for everybody. But truly, essentially, who this applies to is any small business with 500 employees or less. There were some exceptions for NAICS code designations, primarily restaurants that may have been excluded from that 500 employee designation, but just about everybody has been able to, with 500 employees or less, has been eligible for the program. And really the underwriting here has been more of a good faith underwriting on the parts of the banks, certifying that the supporting documentation has been there within the application, and the borrower signs off on their need for the funds, and then actually going into the calculation of the loan amount ends up being 2.5 times their total monthly payroll costs from the past year, or the lesser of that of $10 million. So I guess maybe I can stop there briefly, and ask you, Roxy, if there have been any questions that come in. I know I've provided a lot of information here at the start, but I think that's been some of the confusion to start with of what what it is and how it's been calculated and what it's gone through.
Dan, we actually do have a question. Okay, here's the question. It says, I'm a realtor and I got approved for the PPP, and they've sent me the loan docs to sign. I'm not set up for payroll as it's just me. Do I need to deposit the funds into a business account and then write myself a check for my paycheck? Is this how I'll approve that the portion went for payroll?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that from how I understand it is that, even independent contractors and sole proprietors do qualify for this program. I think as long as you're keeping some records as to how you have been previously compensated in terms of your previous paychecks, and you can provide additional documentation as to how the loan proceeds were deployed, you should be able to cover yourself. Now, again, I would suggest that you check out the SBA's website and their frequently asked questions as a good resource for understanding how the loan proceeds should be used. But general guidelines are to just keep very strong documentation, keep a spreadsheet, how you receive the funds, which account they've gone into, and then how they were ultimately deployed.
Okay, we do have some more questions. One question is about the slides, though. Yes, as I mentioned in the beginning, everybody will get a copy of the presentation. It'll be emailed to you afterwards. The next question we have is, do we have to have an account at the bank you apply with? My current business account is at Chase, and they are too backlogged to process.
Yeah, that's another really great question. Speaking from my perspective, I know that our institution has limited the applications that we are accepting to depository and or borrowing clients. So to answer your question, yes, you would need to have one for us. That being said, and then this isn't the truest answer, but and this is just my opinion, I have heard that other smaller institutions, community banks have been able to accept applications from prospects or non-clients. So if you're still in need of one, again, to my knowledge, there are still funds left. I would encourage you to reach out to either your current lender or bank if they can't process it, then to go to another local community bank.
Okay, the next thing we had, someone wants to know if there's still money, and it sounds like you're saying there may still be a little bit of money left. And then there's another question: what do realtors spend PPP on? Oops, hold on a second. The questions are coming in so fast, I'm losing my place. Okay, what do realtors spend PPP on? Can you have PPP and unemployment insurance?
I'm not certain about the unemployment insurance. I don't know if that would disqualify you from receiving PPP or not. But in terms of a realtor, if you're, again, I assume it's either a sole proprietorship, an independent contractor, or if you have W-2 employees or you issue yourself a W-2, then those would apply. So about your question about employment insurance, I'm not certain about that.
Okay, we have a few more. It says, I was Is there an individual pay cap of $8,333.33 per paycheck?
Yeah, essentially yes. So there was no any compensation over $100,000 would be excluded from this program for one individual. So, for example, if you make $200,000, on a W-2 last year, only $100,000 of that would qualify under this program.
Okay, and then we just have a comment from someone that they were able to open an account at a small bank in Rockwall because they applied for the loan at a large bank at Wells Fargo and it was delayed. Now we have another question. It's been reported today that SBA is limiting the amount of the loan and are now only taking new applications from agricultural businesses. Are you aware of that?
I have not been aware of that. I didn't see that news headline today. I know that within this second round of funding that the SBA did limit the number of applications or SBA loan numbers that were to be secured from the system on an hourly basis, just to make sure that the larger banks weren't securing a disproportionate amount of funds, and to allow some of the smaller banks that serve our some of the more rural communities or smaller business clients, to allow them to make sure they've got access to the program as well. And also just kind of candidly to give you some insight as to how this program works from an operational standpoint. So these are loans that are being made by the banks. These are balance sheet loans, but then are federally guaranteed essentially by the government. So all these loans are made on the bank balance sheets, but prior to doing so, the banks will go to the SBA website and secure an SBA loan number for a specific application once the good faith review of that application has been completed. That essentially reserves that amount of that application's funding within the program, and that's how the SBA has been able to track the amount of funds that have been deployed, where it's been deployed in terms of institution, and so forth. So as of today, my knowledge is that there are still funds available. I think banks continue to pull these loan numbers, and then once those, all loan funds that have been made available are exhausted, then that's at what point the program will end.
Okay, and I know you need to get on with the presentation, but let
Sure.
me ask this one right here. Can you apply for PPP if you already received EIDL?
That's an excellent question. We'll get to that in the program, but the answer is yes. If you receive the EIDL already and you apply for PPP, the EIDL will be refinanced within the PPP application.
And we have one on here. Someone's asking, why would you apply for PPP as an independent contractor if you could apply for unemployment?
I'm not certain what the unemployment process is. I'm not as educated on that. I know that the PPP is essentially a grant. So these are forgivable expenses or forgivable proceeds if used for payroll purposes, used for qualifying expenses essentially. So I'm not certain how employment works. That has to be recognized as income, in the next year's tax return. But these proceeds would not.
Okay, and a lot of the other questions, some of the people are answering each other and whatever in here. I think we can go on with your presentation, and you probably answer some of these, and then we'll pick up the questions again in a little bit.
Sounds great. Thanks. Now I guess we'll talk about some more of the guidelines here and the use of proceeds. So there have been a lot of questions on what these qualifying expenses include. These include payroll costs, any interest on commercial mortgages or business mortgages, and that's interest, debts incurred before the covered period, which the covered period begins, I believe it was February 15th of 2020 is when the covered period began. I think it was on the previous slide. Yeah, covered period is February 15th, 2020 through June 30th, 2020. And then rent and utilities. Again, we mentioned this, that there would be a degree of forgiveness to these loans. The most important thing, and again, the spirit of this program is so that the funds are used for payroll costs, helping to keep paychecks going. So of the PPP proceeds that are provided, at least 75% of those loan proceeds must be used for payroll purposes. The remaining 25% can be used for the rent, utilities, interest on mortgage, etc. As they go forward. Important thing also to note is that proceeds must be used on these qualifying expenses in an 8-week period following the loan origination in order for them to become forgivable. Any kind of, I think, outstanding amounts would be subject to the loan pricing and term, and that's outlined here at a 1% fixed rate and then 2 years, which again only applies to the unforgiven loan balance. Nice thing here, no securities required, no collateral, personal guarantees, there are no fees. So this has truly been a very high volume, very simplified, emergency type facility to provide relief for our small businesses. As these applications have come in, a lot of the supporting documentations have been, payroll records from, payroll processors, tax returns, Form 940s, 941s, and any kind of other payroll tax filings that have been that our borrowers are providing. Those allow us to complete our good faith review based on the application that is submitted, and then allows us to move it relatively quickly through the process. But again, it has been a little clunky, throughout. The rules have changed what feels like almost daily, and so that's created some degree of log jam, and the banks being able to to process everything. So I can certainly understand, and a lot of my clients have had a lot of frustration, but I think that the banks are put in a tough position to try and administer this program on hardly any notice, and maybe processing 10 times the number of loans that they normally would in 1 month that they would in an entire year. So certainly a lot of frustration out there, but bear with us. Again, here we talked about a lot of these things of what the cost that would be forgivable ultimately, and again, that's a very important piece to this program, and it should be noted that the expenses should be used within that 8-week period beginning the date of the loan origination. I would also encourage a lot of people, if they're having a more detailed question, to also consult their accountants. A lot of accountants have put a lot of great thought pieces out, and so they've been a great resource as we've partnered with a lot of them. What else? I think we touched on a lot of these. Again, more of the payroll costs exclude compensation for individual employees in excess of 100,000. Talked about the forgiveness. And then, okay, so that kind of covers a lot of the PPP things that, from a high level that I had. So we can talk about some of the relief for existing SBA borrowers at this time. So this is again another nice relief program that's been provided. So there's current borrowers of SBA or SBA borrowers within the 7A program, the 504 program, and microloan programs. They'll be able to receive up to 6 months of payment relief, and again that includes principal, interest payments for 6 months that are covered by the government, and to allow them to have that burden of relief. And these are things that to my knowledge, they don't have. There's no application process on the part of our SBA borrowers. Those are just things that the institutions are, they'll provide a letter to this borrower, and then it'll happen automatically, which is again a really nice relief for them during this time. EIDL. So this is a little bit different. The EIDL, and I don't have as much of knowledge or experience with the EIDL loans. These have been made available to borrowers directly through the SBA. The banks have not been asked to administer this, but this is, I don't believe that there is a forgiveness aspect to this, if I'm not mistaken. There's just essentially greater flexibility within this. It's actual loan, but again, another program for distressed borrowers at this time. Again, EIDL grants. I think these were the advance on the loan, which again has been made available directly by the SBA, and then qualifying expenses include paid sick leave to employees, maintaining payroll, meeting increased costs of materials, rent on mortgages, so forth. So again, if you were to apply for this EIDL and it were received at prior to PPP, you apply for PPP, then the Paycheck Protection Program loan refinances that EIDL within that. So I'll stop again here, kind of getting towards the end of kind of my prepared remarks, if you will. And Roxy, I'll see if you have any other questions that.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. We have a lot here.
Okay.
Okay. It says
I'll do my best.
Okay. If I was an independent contractor last year and a broker this year who hasn't taken a salary yet, can I use the independent contractor income as a basis for my PPP?
Yeah, to my knowledge, yes. You can use the period that you're allowed to submit for, as long as their supporting documentation was for the year 2019.
Okay, here's another. I am a fresh new realtor, just started 3 months ago, and do not have a business account yet and haven't closed any deals so far. Due to the current situation, I couldn't make any progress. Do I qualify for PPP compensation? If yes, how can I proceed?
It's an excellent question. Because there wouldn't be any actual loan, or I'm sorry, supporting documentation to show the amount of money that you would be essentially missing out on because of this. I think it would be really difficult for a bank to process that. That being said, I would encourage you to call your accountant and see what they might say in terms of specifics around that. But knowing, coming from our experience and reviewing these, I think it'd be tough for us to be able to give you an answer of yes, you would be able to apply for it if there's no history or documentation to support a loan amount.
Okay, here's another one. It says, will both the EIDL and PPP loans be forgiven? Asking specifically for realtors who are independent contractors with no employees.
To my knowledge, within the PPP, it is forgivable. Again, if those expenses are used, or I'm sorry, if those loan proceeds are used for eligible expenses. And again, those are payroll costs, rent, utility payments. I recognize that independent contractors are different than your traditional small business. But that being said, I think as long as you can provide supporting documentation that shows that here's what I've made over the last, in 2019, and here's the monthly average. You multiply that by 2.5 times, and then you keep very strong supporting documentation as to how those proceeds were used. Then and again, I can't say exactly because I can't interpret the SBA's rules. But as I read them from what they have provided, then to my knowledge, they should be forgivable.
Okay, here's another one. I am on payroll currently and just received PPP funding. Can I up my payroll to distribute my PPP funds?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Yeah, and that's all okay, maybe we'll go into more clarification further down. Let's see here. Can we use this for 100% for payroll?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Define utilities. Could this include cell phone bills, office internet bill for an individual with a brick and mortar office outside of the home?
Yeah, great question. To my knowledge, those are included, but the SBA frequently asked questions. They have provided what their interpretation of utilities are. So I would refer you to that. But I believe that those utilities would be qualifying expenses, cell phone bills and so forth, as I understand it. Now again, I'd refer to the SBA website. Make sure you talk to your accountant. Keep a detailed list. But as it's written, then those would be qualifying expenses.
Okay, if health insurance is paid by the company, is that a qualified expense as well?
Health insurance benefits paid by the company, yes. So in addition to payroll, the health insurance benefits paid by the company, as well as other employee benefits like 401ks, pensions, those would also be qualifying in the overall calculation of the amounts that would be eligible under the PPP.
All right, someone's asking, could they open an account with your bank and then apply for a PPP with your bank?
Great question. As a banker and producer, I wish the answer was yes. Unfortunately, right now, we are not accepting more applications, just given the tremendous volume that we have secured. So opening a new account with us right now is not something we would be able to accomplish.
Okay, if you normally take a home office deduction at the end of the year, is there a way to now pay for utilities, internet, interest on mortgage through your PPP funds to go towards the 25%? If so, how do you do that?
That's a great question. I don't know that one. I think that's a question for your accountant. And I don't want to give you some wrong advice on that. So I would refer you to the accountant.
And this one's kind of similar. For an independent contractor, can it be used for mortgage on the home if my office is in the home?
That's a touchy one. I would, I think that if your home office, I think it's how it works is you have a portion of your home that counts as your home office. I think that, as a prorated amount, then maybe that would work. But again, I please don't refer to your accountant on that. I would not feel right advising you to do it one way or the other, and nor do I think I can legally. So as it's written, mortgage interest is a qualifying expense, but or at least use of proceeds. But I would be cautious about that and talk to your accountant prior to deploying that.
And we have one here. They said they've called several banks and no one is doing PPP. Where's a resource where they can find out where they can apply?
The SBA website, SBA.gov, has provided a list of lenders, of who's participating. Yeah, I recognize that it's hard to find one, especially if you bank with someone that is kind of overloaded right now, and then you're forced to figure something else out. I don't have a specific resource in terms of, call XYZ Bank at the time, or right now at least. But that would probably be your best bet right now, is to check out the SBA.gov website.
Okay, and then someone asked if it's possible to apply at an out-of-state bank. I'm assuming that that's fine, right?
Yeah. As long as they're willing to do it, and you sign all the proper documentation, I don't see why that's a problem.
Let's see. What's required for an agent to declare income lost for PPP?
What's required for? Honestly, I think it's just it's a good faith certification from the applicant, saying that they've been adversely affected by this pandemic, and that's why they're applying. The SBA has not come out and said that there will, what specifically their audit process is going to be. I know for a fact when Secretary of the Treasury came out and said that they would be auditing every loan made in excess of $2 million. But I have no idea what it's going to look like under that. But right now, it's just a good faith certification that it's adversely affected you and your business.
Okay, another question about, does it have to be paid back? So you want to give us the guidelines again on what forgiveness is about and what has to be paid back?
Certainly, yes. So the use of proceeds, again, can be on payroll costs, rent, utilities, interest on mortgage that's been incurred prior to the covered period. And so those loan proceeds that will be granted, say, on day one, you've got 8 weeks to deploy those on those qualifying expenses. It's very important to keep very accurate records of these loan proceeds and how they have been used, so that you can ensure that the maximum amount is ultimately forgivable. Anything that has been used on a non-qualifying expense will be subject to the loan proceeds after the fact. I'm sorry, will be subject to the loan terms after the fact. So 1% interest rate, 2-year loan term.
Okay, we have a question about the EIDL advance and if it can still be applied for.
To my knowledge, yes. Again, those are directly through the SBA's website. So go into SBA.gov to apply directly for the EIDL. And to my knowledge, it's still available.
And someone said they want to know how to pay back the EIDL. They said they received $1,000 with no instructions on payback.
Excellent question. I don't know exactly how that works. But if you want to pay it back, I would, again, perhaps reach out to any SBA resources, because banks are not administering that program.
Okay. For an independent contractor, can it be used for interest on more? Oh, here's more about using it on interest. And I think you said they need to get with their accountant on that. So let's see.
Yeah.
Can you send us a link on the qualified expenses, the outlines of what qualifies, such as cell phone bills, et cetera? Don't know if you want to get into all of that, because doesn't that kind of vary?
Yeah, again, we have been, we as bankers have been advised to not give specific instructions as to what can be used, just for liability purposes. But again, I'll refer you to the SBA's website, and I can send the resources that I have to Roxy and Elizabeth after this, so that they can share it with anybody that's interested in exploring that further.
That sounds great. We appreciate that.
Certainly.
So I'm currently on payroll. Can I? Oh, this was something that was already asked before. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Okay. And
there may have been a clarifying question if they're currently on payroll, but I think that the person, if they wanted to increase payroll.
Yeah, let's see. I've got several here that are. Where is the EIDL grant application on SBA?
Excellent question. It's on their website, but I don't know exactly where it is.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sometimes you guys are just going to have to dig through this. I know it becomes difficult.
Sorry.
Let's see. How to determine if you are self-employed or independent? This is one of the first questions on the application.
Sorry, you cut out just for a brief second. Can you repeat the question?
It just, how do you determine if you're self-employed or an independent contractor? This is the first part of the questions on the application.
Right. So, I mean, it depends on how you file for your income, if you get a 1099 or how you file from a filing perspective, or what you did in 2019. So okay. I would refer to whatever you did during that time as how you would designate how you're applying.
All right. And let's see, is an EIN registered in another state? Does that qualify the same as a company registered in the state of Texas?
Yes, to my knowledge. What do you mean qualify the same?
Well, I'm not sure. They type these questions into me, so
okay.
I think they're just asking if they're registered one way and registered. Okay, here he goes. He's responded back. He says registered. So he's
if they're registered in another state.
Uh-huh.
And he's in another state besides Texas. I mean, it's a federal program, it's not a state program. Oh. So as long as you have an EIN number, it matches that you're the owner of that business, and you've got the qualifying expenses and supporting documentation, then yes, to my knowledge, you would qualify.
All right. I'm looking to see. Some of these folks are just answering other people's questions. So give me a second here. Let's see. Okay, so that's all just answers, I think, to the previous question. So I think we have, okay. Oh, wait, here comes another one. Can you speak to 501c3?
Yes, 501c3 not-for-profit. They qualify as well, which is, again, another great one. So, again, it's 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, and then obviously any other qualifying expenses within there, but they're the same as a for-profit business. So yes, they apply.
Okay, and then we have someone here that says they don't use an accountant or CPA for their tax purposes. Do they need to seek advice of a tax attorney or a CPA?
For specific questions, I would encourage that. If you're unsure about when you're completing an application, and if try and exhaust all options first. Review the SBA's website and their guidelines on how to complete the application. But if you have more specific questions, a lot of times banks have been trying to keep as much liability off of us as we possibly can, just because we've only been asked to simply administer this program, and rather than try and interpret the SBA and government's rules and laws. So you still have more questions and don't quite understand them per the SBA, then yes, I would encourage you to reach out to a local CPA or tax attorney.
All right, and then is an application allowed to be resubmitted?
And if it's an application allowed to be resubmitted, yes. I don't know why you would want to do that, or what more of the details around that would be. If you were, it's a tough question to answer. It's just a yes or no question, or yes or no answer. But yes, you can resubmit an application if you have not secured an SBA loan number.
Oh, here we go. They put a follow up if it has been rejected for an issue. So
been rejected for an issue.
So I'm assuming you clear up the issue and then you send it back. I'm not real sure, but
yeah, maybe. I mean, if there's a kind of a deeper, it sounds like that might require a much longer an understanding of the question and deeper understanding of the situation. So I mean, yes, maybe, but again, it's going to depend on your situation.
Right. It says that it's being cleared up, but yeah, okay. And also, does the 501c3 qualify for an EIDL?
I don't know about that, but to my knowledge, yes, it says within this page here where it says under EIDL loans, as nonprofits are eligible under those programs too.
Okay, Dan, oh, well, I think we're done, and then we get another one. I think that I'm speaking quicker than they can talk.
keep them coming.
Okay, it says, as a new realtor, I received my first commission on December 2019 and 2 more commissions last month. How would I qualify, or how would I calculate what I qualify for? So they have only received 3 commissions.
That's a great question, and the SBA also is allowing for new businesses to apply in this, and that's from January and February of 2020. Essentially, is the designation of the time that would be qualifying. So if your average income during that time was, for round numbers, call it $10,000 per month, then that would be how you would ultimately calculate that. But just showing what when the business started, what your previous however many months of income and qualifying expenses under the program, then yes, that would still apply.
All right, and
does that answer the question?
Yeah, and that looks like we are at the end of our questions. I think you have finished your slide presentation, and this has been really great information. And obviously, there's still a lot of questions out there around how all this works. I know it's new for you, new for the people applying. So, do you have any final words for everyone?
Yeah, no, I just again appreciate everybody attending and listening for what we can help. Hopefully this was helpful and kind of giving you an idea of what is going on and how the program is working and was intended to work, and how the banks have been asked to administer this program. So again, if there are additional questions, feel free to reach out to Roxy and Elizabeth, and they'll get those to us, and I can answer as many as I can. And I'll also provide the slide deck and any other resources that we can to help answer more questions. But hopefully, again, was more helpful to allow you to be consultative with your clients, and then also understand what you're paying for as a government citizen, or I'm sorry, as a citizen of the country, and your tax dollars and how they're being deployed.